In this Avowed video, I'm going to be talking about my hands-on impressions having played the game at Gamescom last week. I'm going to be talking about some of the mechanics, talking about what I like about the game, what I don't like about the game. And just so you know, I have played through this exact section. This is the same demo that I played, though this is not my footage. This is footage that was provided by Obsidian and the Avowed team. So in Avowed, you play as a godlike, and the events of Avowed take place a bit after the events of Pillars of Eternity 2 Deadfire. So in terms of what's the timeline in Aora, you're going to be playing in the world of Aora a little bit after Pillars of Eternity 2 Deadfire. And in terms of gameplay, Avowed feels kind of like a mashup of Pillars of Eternity and Skyrim or something like that. You have the lore and codex that were in Pillars of Eternity, so if you haven't played before, you can actually learn about certain concepts of the game, like Aothis, Aora, and the Deadfire Archipelago, etc. There's lots of things you can learn without having played Pillars of Eternity, so don't think that's a reason that you can't play Avowed. And so far from what I've seen, if you love the storytelling in Pillars of Eternity and Pillars of Eternity 2, if you've played those games, you should feel right at home in Avowed. There is a lot of lore and things like that that connect this game to Pillars of Eternity, and it really gives it a Pillars of Eternity feeling, which is what I was really hoping for when I played and was pleasantly surprised. And there's a lot of dialogue options with different choices depending on what your attributes are, what background you chose, and other factors. But you'll have many ways to solve quests. The one that you're seeing in this gameplay footage, I've seen finished 3 different ways. 2 of them I did myself, and a third one I saw during a presentation. And I speculate there's probably at least 1 or 2 more ways to complete this quest. So there's going to be multiple ways to complete quests, multiple things that can happen during dialogue, which again is very reminiscent of Pillars of Eternity. So if you like that about that game, or you like that about RPGs, you can expect a lot of that in Avowed. And exploration in Avowed is probably my favorite part, and I think it's arguably the best part of the game. The amount of excitement that I got from exploring, the sense of wonder, was just present in spades. It kind of gave me that Skyrim feeling again from the first time I played Skyrim, but in a Pillars of Eternity universe. And there's a huge focus, even in this small little dungeon cave area that we're playing, on puzzle solving, hidden interactables, tons of loot here and there. And there's also a focus on jumping, climbing, and running and jumping across gaps and getting to places, which is not something you typically think of when you think of Pillars of Eternity. That's kind of been introduced to this game. And the loot you find is very reminiscent of Pillars of Eternity. If you look at the inventory screen, you'll notice right away that you almost have the exact same slots from Pillars of Eternity 2, and that unique items that you find can drastically change your build. You can just theory craft this from looking at them, and they could completely change the way that you play by giving you health back when you damage enemies, or increasing your damage, but increasing the damage that you take, making you more glass cannon. There's going to be a lot of weapons, armor, trinkets that really make you go, how can I incorporate this into my build? So I think the itemization of Avowed is going to be absolutely solid in this game, and I can't wait to see more of that. I really liked this system in Pillars of Eternity and Pillars of Eternity 2, so I'm glad to see it make a return here. Now, when it comes to classes or class skill trees in the game, you don't have a chosen class. There's a wizard, fighter, and ranger skill tree, and a godlike skill tree. You are godlike in this game, and you can mix and match skills from all 3 or all 4 of those trees and spend points in those trees as makes sense for the build that you want. I'm not exactly sure how it works in terms of, how far you can go into a tree, so we'll just have to see how that is. And I'm a bit sad that we won't have all the skill trees from Pillars of Eternity. There were an absolute metric ton of skills in those games, and I feel like that's one of the things that made those games so great, but I can see how they couldn't quite implement them all here. That would have been an absolute ton of work to do. But I do appreciate that you're not locked to 1 or 2 classes, that you can take skills from all 3 of these trees and sort of tri-class, if you will. There is some upside there, and I feel like that is a pretty good one. There are also new skills that we've never seen before in Pillars of Eternity, and there are also returning skills that you'll have seen from those games. We covered some of these in our previous Avowed videos, but you will find fan-favorite spells and abilities from those games, so that's nice to see as well. Kind of gives you a bit of a nostalgia feeling when you're using them. So combat in Avowed uses a combination of a stamina and essence system. Stamina is used for weapon attacks, while essence is used for skills and spells. Stamina replenishes while you're not doing any actions, and essence does not unless you use a potion or find items that replenish essence. Like, for instance, I think during my demo there was a ring or a trinket that you could equip that slowly replenished essence, so there will be items like that in the game. And this was an interesting system, but combat doesn't feel that great in Avowed, in my opinion. I feel like the balance of it is all over the place. For instance, when you're playing a wizard-like character, if you're playing like a mage, you're constantly running out of essence, and it feels like it takes a long time to cast spells for that, and you don't deal nearly as much damage as, like, you know, the fighter or the ranger. When we were playing, they had set up archetypes for us, and you'll see that in the footage here, that there's a fighter, ranger, and wizard archetype. They've given us 3 footages of the same section, so you can see how they play differently. But wizard is very difficult to play. Not only does it feel like you're constantly interrupted, that you're not doing as much damage, that you're weaker than the other skill trees, but also moving and casting is difficult because you move with WDASD, and you have to cast spells with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you have to take your fingers off moving in order to cast, unless you're like, you know, someone who's really advanced at this, and it made playing wizard very difficult. By contrast, when you were playing ranger, for instance, all you had to do was point your pistols at something and pull the trigger, and they died pretty quickly, or shoot something from stealth with your bow and it died in 1 shot. Yes, stealth archer is a thing in this game, so if you love that in Skyrim, you'll be able to play that here. But it was so easy to play ranger by comparison. I simply just pointed and shoot it. It felt like an FPS, and things died quickly. Didn't have any resource management problems. And the same when playing a melee character. You just kind of charge in and swing, and everything dies. And you use your skills when needed, but you really don't have to use a ton of skills. So the gameplay is kind of simplified when you're playing ranger or fighter, and it's more complex when playing mage, but it's not as effective. So you can play really complex if you want, but it's just not as easy to do. So I feel like there's a lot of work here that needs to be done in terms of balancing this game before launch. Otherwise, I feel like a lot of people are just going to ignore some of the things that make combat cool because they're not easy to do, and they might just take the path of least resistance. And another thing that has me really concerned about Avowed that you might not see in this gameplay footage is that the performance was pretty bad. It was arguably the worst of any game I saw at Gamescom this year. I was getting probably 30 FPS or lower in a lot of places in this game, and you don't really see it that much in this footage because if you notice, the gameplay footage they provided, the character is just kind of slowly moving as they're exploring. But when I was playing and what I looked around the room and I saw other people doing is you're running, you're sprinting, you're climbing up things, you're jumping a lot, you move quickly, it feels good to move quickly. But when you do that, the FPS tends to go down. So I think there's a reason that you're not seeing that in this gameplay footage. A lot of that fast motion is because it will, you know, reduce the FPS here. So unfortunately, again, this is not my captured footage, so there's nothing I could do about showing this to you. But I thought I should bring this to your attention because it is actually a major concern of mine. And another thing I found out later, which I found out a couple days ago, is that this game is going to be locked at 30 FPS on Xbox consoles. So you're not even going to have like a 60 FPS mode. This is something that's happening more and more to console games, particularly Xbox. I think it's because they have to make the game run on both the X and S systems in order to be able to publish it, and the S is obviously a much weaker system. But you saw games that have come out on Xbox that have gotten 60 FPS updates post-launch. I would expect this game also gets one of those. But unfortunately, if you're playing on Xbox, you're going to be locked at 30 FPS, at least if you get it at launch, which is not surprising. I kind of assumed that would happen from when I played, but it's also a bit disappointing. You know, when you look at something like Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, which is another first-person RPG that's coming out right around the same time as Avowed, within a week of it, it's an open-world RPG. It graphically looks better than Avowed. The performance of it is better than Avowed. It really makes you wonder why they were not able to pull this off in this game, and I think, you know, this day and age where performance is such a huge issue for players, I don't know how much of that's going to be forgiven. But lastly, before I kind of close out this video, to kind of leave on a high note here, I do really enjoy the music and voice acting of the game so far, particularly the voice acting. If you hear a familiar voice when you listen to Kai speak, who's your Amawa companion, you should be able to realize right away that you recognize that voice, and if you don't know who that is actually Brandon Keener, who plays the voice of Garrus in the Mass Effect franchise. So I expect there to be more voice actors of that caliber in this game, which I definitely think will add to it.
If you believe the priests and watchers, the gods ripped their souls clean out of their bodies after Aethys clobbered the wheel. But nobody's sure what really happened, and the gods aren't in a hurry to explain.
So long story short, Avowed, I enjoyed my time with the game. I really feel like it's going to be a fun game to play, but you kind of have to temper your expectations a bit. Unfortunately, unlike Pillars of Eternity, where combat was just as fun to me as the exploration and dialogue, I feel like it's going to be a sore point in this game or a bit lower down. you really need to rely on the exploration and the dialogue to carry you through this game. And if you're not a player who likes heavy dialogue and lots of exploration, but you like a lot of combat in your games, this just might not be the game for you. So that wraps up our video. I'm curious what you guys think of Avowed, having seen the gameplay, having seen other gameplay and other people's thoughts on it. What do you make of Avowed so far? Is this still a game that's on your radar? Are you a little bit more apprehensive about it, having heard some of the things I said here? Let me know in the comments below.